So I don't have any of the recommended Loctite thread sealant with Teflon. That stuff's good to 300 degrees, I think it says. But I do have Honda Bond high temp. It claims it's good to 600. It's got to be better. This is what I'm using for the head bolts. Alright, so I ran into a problem when I was trying to set the lash for my lifters here. And what I noticed was, if you notice, these two lifters are down completely, which means that these springs are not supposed to be open at the moment, or these valves aren't supposed to be open. And you can see, as I push down on the rocker, it's pretty easy to compress. Alright, so I can push the push rod down into the lifter with ease. And for the most part, I can do that with a lot of them. This one's on its way up, so there's more tension on that one. This one's a little questionable, so at the moment I put a question mark. See if we can get that. There you go. I put a question mark in front of it just as a marker, and I'm working my way around, and I'm finding most of them are pretty soft. Okay, I can push that in and get full range of motion. The cup is being depressed down into the lifter. And I wasn't sure if that was normal or if that was an abnormality. So, the reason I question it is because I'm trying to set all the rockers to 0 lash in order to set the preload. Well, on some, but not all. Interesting. Alright, so here's my point. On some, what I noticed was I cannot compress the cup in the lifter when I press down. They were too hard. So, bottom line is this. If you run into this problem when you're working, and by the way, these are used hydraulic lifters. So I think what happened is some of the lifters, but not all, were already filled with oil and had been so-called, pumped up, so to speak, with oil. So they were hydraulically maxed out, thus preventing the plunger from being able to be pushed in easily. So what I noticed was, or what I started to do was, I'm just working my way around, trying to push them in. I put an X on the ones that I cannot push. For instance, like this one here. And I'm rotating the motor by hand, like so. And I can hear a little bit of gurgling, a little bit of squishing. And I think what's happening is that I'm bleeding the oil out of the lifters. Because the more I do this, the more I see lifters that I thought were stuck starting to become, for lack of better words, unstuck. So, for instance, this one here with the X in front of me. If I take that all the way down, let's see. No, well, I'm getting more travel than I could. It's still not I still can't compress it all the way in. Yeah, I'm getting some travel now. So I'm wondering, like for instance this one, I can push that all the way in. I can feel a good springiness to it. Same with this one. This one still feels hard after an initial bit of give. This one, very springy, springy. Not so much, and I think that's because it's lifting. Little springy, but not all that great. So I'm going to keep rotating the crank and I don't know if you can hear that, but sure, there's the sound of the pistons moving up and down in the cylinders, but in addition to that, there's definitely some, in fact, you can see it pretty decent here. I think I put too much light on it. But right around the edge of this lifter here, I actually get a few air bubbles on occasion. And keep in mind, this lifter valley is it's filled with a bit of oil, so the lifter bores are pretty wet with oil. So let's see if I can get some more bubbling to occur down at the bottom here. Yeah, you see some slight bit of bubbling there as I turn the crank. And I think what's happening is air is slowly bleeding out of the lifter through the hole on the side of the lifter, and thus pushing, causing some bubbles to form around the edge here, which is a little wet with oil. So I'm just going to keep going here and see if I can't free up all of these. Now I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this one down beyond where it needs to be tightened down, just in order to get some additional compression in the lifter. I'm careful not to do too much because I don't want to take the risk of bending the valve, but I didn't really give it that much return. So let's see if the theory is right. Then push rod should push the cup down further into the lifter and help bleed off the oil that's inside. Now it's actually causing the rocker to move, so this may not work that well. And there is a possibility that the lifter itself is clogged internally. And keep in mind, there was a lot of rust in this motor, so I know it's all a lot of water. So I wouldn't be surprised if some water got in there, rusted, maybe caused, there are little tiny passages, a check valve and something else or other inside the lifter itself. And if that's gummed up or blocked in any other way, maybe from rust or whatever, it won't bleed out the oil and it will stay filled or just completely seized, whatever the case might be. But I'm going to keep going, see what happens. Actually heard some air escaping from something. And keep in mind, spark plugs are out, so I shouldn't hear any amount of air other than any air really should be coming from the lifters bleeding. Because I shouldn't have any compression yet if that's the spark plugs in. just going to keep going here and see what happens. Just heard some air release from something. It had to be a lifter. And it's good to see that some of these lifters are actually rotating as well, as they're supposed to. Give this one more shot. Again, it's compressing the valve spring, which may not have enough force to overcome the tension inside that lifter. So I might have to take that lifter out and bleed it, take it apart and bleed it. See if maybe there isn't a clog inside. But to further my point, let me see if we can catch one on this side. Here we go. Here's one that's lifting. Okay. So this lifter looks as if though it's reached its maximum travel. Move this light out of the way. And looking down inside, I can see that the cup that's within the lifter itself is pretty far down in there. I don't know how this is going to show up on camera, but now this one, which I have an X on, doesn't seem to depress as far. Alright, that one's depressed pretty well. Alright, so we're coming up. I think we're at about max travel there. It looks like it's pretty depressed now. Let's see what happens when we go all the way down. Alright, let's see if that bled off. Let me see if I can relieve some tension. Yeah, it definitely has gotten better. So if I relieve some tension here, oh yeah, definitely better. All right, let me relieve some more tension. Okay. Obviously we're pretty loose. We've got travel here. Yeah. And I don't know if that's full range of movement, but I think it's a lot more than what I had originally. So I think that was the problem. I think my lifters, for the most part, were hydraulic, I guess you could say. Hydraulically locked. This one still seems a bit rigid. But I wonder, I also did put a good bit of oil on top, so I wonder if it's filling itself back up again. Let's take a little bit off this one. Okay, so that's pretty loose. Try to press it by hand. Yeah, definitely more springiness now. Okay, so I think that was my issue. I feel a little bit of binding. Let me loosen this one up a little bit too. Okay, so there's a good bit of play now. Let's try to depress it. Definitely better. I don't think it's as good as the others, but it's definitely better. All right. So I guess the bottom line here is, if you're trying to set the preload on your hydraulic cams, on your hydraulic lifters, and it just doesn't seem like it's working, turn the crank around several revolutions slowly, like so, and see if the lifters will bleed off. My understanding is, in order to correctly set preload, you need your lifters to be, what's the right word? Not full of oil, put it that way. The plungers need to be able to move freely to set an accurate preload. Still don't think I'm getting as much travel out of this one as the one next to it. But it's a hell of a lot better than it was. So now I can go around, I think, and get back to setting my zero lash first. Yeah, I can still hear some gurgling going on in here. I think these are still bleeding off. So I'm just going to keep going here. It can only make the situation better. Definitely better. We went from zero movement to a good bit of movement. Even the one that was questionable is now moving rather well. Alright, so that seems to be the deal. Just try to take your, so what I did was, I went around and set every rocker to zero lash. We're pretty close to it. And now I'm just running it through several cycles, several rotations. And I can definitely hear the air coming out of some of the lifters. And like I said before, I can actually see some air bubbles around the lifters themselves. So I know that we're effectively bleeding these off. Okay. So I'm going to restart my valve lash process. And I've seen a few guys explain this online, so this isn't my process. But the idea is, now actually I'm going to go backwards first, because I want to restart now that I've bled off my lifters. I'm going to make sure I put play back into the valve train. Okay. Okay. Now this isn't something you would normally do. I'm only doing this because I want to restart the process. Make sure I got play. All right. Now there are some that were on the verge of being compressed. So turn that one the wrong way. So I want to loosen these up. The ones that are actually on their way to being lifted. Now that they're down. Make sure I got a lot of play. Play, play. This one could use some. Play. Alright, so now I need 1, 2, just these two I think, to go all the way down. Yep, got play, got play. Let me check this out. This one's actually lifting. Okay, it's seated. We got play. Alright. So I think I got play everywhere. Just double check. Yep, yep. Yep. Let's check these. Check this one. That one's good. Good. This one's on down. That one's good. 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 No, let's check this. Okay, good. Alright, so now I'm starting with a sloppy valve train, which is what I want. So now what I want to do is start the process of removing all of the slop. Just get that out of the way. So I just twist and turn slowly. Well, you have to go clockwise to tighten, so make sure you're going clockwise. All right. So I can just about feel it bind. All right, no more up and down movement. Slight amount of bind. Call that one good. Now you want to make sure the socket is not pushing down on the rocker ball, because if it is, it's going to throw everything, it's going to throw you out of whack. No more vertical movement. You can feel it bind. On to the next. No more up and down. Make sure I'm centered. I'm not touching the socket to the ball of the rocker. Call that one good. I can feel it binding. Alright, so that one's good. Getting there. No movement. Feel it binding. Give it a little bit more. Okay. It's almost like using a feeler gauge. Call this one good. Right about there. Okay. And then it doesn't have to be 90 degrees, but I'm going to turn the crank 90 degrees. Do the same process. And the idea here is, again, I'm just taking the slop out of any that, some of these rockers were actually under tension because the lifter was lifting. So as we go through progressively, we will eventually take all of them out of tension, which is what we want. So this one's obviously a little bit loose. Slowly tighten that one. Maybe a little more. That feels pretty good. That one's a little loose. Much better. Maybe a little too much better. That's good. Good. Oh, slop. And as we progress through, we should find fewer and fewer that have slop in them. Alright, this one's loose. Call that one good. Just a little too sloppy in that one. That's good. That's good. Maybe just a hair. Alright. Give it another 90. And again, it doesn't have to be 90. Do whatever works best for you, but the point is to keep going through and making sure that you eventually hit all of these. Because inevitably, some will be lifting, others will be on the back side and working our way down. So we want to make sure we get all of them on the downside. Alright, that's pretty good. Check these. There's a little bit of play here. Spinning is one thing. I lubricated underneath the lifters on the top of the push rod and the bottom of the push rod. So I'm not getting much tension per se. Just want to feel it touch. Alright, so now this one's got slop in it. Okay, that feels pretty good. Just a hair. Yeah, that's good. Alright. Give it another 90. 90-ish. So it seems a little sloppy. Give it a little more attention. It feels pretty good. A little on this one. Okay, that's good. Work it right around again. Alright. Give it another 90. And as we progress, we should be finding fewer and fewer that are still loose. Okay, give it another 90. So by now I think that was maybe 4 90-degree turns, so that'll give us the full 360. Let's just go through it again, just to double check. Okay, feel good. I believe that's the second 90. Feeling good so far. Third 90. Put a little more on this one. Not much. Okay, that feels good. Okay, I believe this is the fourth 90, so that should give me 2 full turns. It's just a little sloppy. Okay, that's better. Just a little more on this one. And again, all I'm feeling for at this point is that the push rod still rotates in my fingers easily. There's no up and down play anymore. Ones that just barely bind. Alright, let's give it another full 360. So here's 90. I can still hear some of these lifters bleeding off, especially this one, probably. Just a little on this one. When you're close, it doesn't really take much to get it to bind. Okay. When I say bind, I don't mean prevent it from turning. I mean just the opposite, where you can actually feel a little bit of drag, a little bit of friction on a push rod. Alright, that's good. Now that should be it, but let's keep going. So I think this will be the third 90 degree on the second turn. Pretty consistent. That should be, I believe, the fourth 90, so that'll be 2 full turns. Let's go for a third. So here's 190. Okay, it's 190, 290, 390, 490, so that should be 3 complete turns. We're pretty close. It doesn't really matter, we're just doing this at this point to be thorough. Now what we want to do is go around to each one of these and give them 3/4 of a turn. So that would equate to, and I've got a 6-point socket on a 6-point bolt, so I can't really align it perfectly at a clock position, but this would be 1/2, 1/4, so that's 3/4. Okay, 1/2, 1/4. Half, and about 1/4. So it should be done. We've now preloaded the lifters. Just give it a few turns just to make sure we're not hitting anything. I mean, make sure our pistons aren't coming up and smacking the valves in there. Everything should still continue rotating freely. I don't feel anything. Good thing I checked these. So as it turns out, I loosened instead of tightened. More than just one. Alright, that would have sucked. So I'm going to start this one over because I'm an idiot. Get that out of the way. Again, if you're trying to tighten things, it really works a hell of a lot better to go clockwise than counterclockwise. So that feels pretty good. And this is the good thing about using this process. Even if you do screw up, it's easy enough to go back and double check. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Try to find a good position to start. This one's not going to cooperate. Alright, so let's just say there, and it should be about 90. Okay, so that one's good. I know I've done the others correctly. Let's double check these first too. I've got bugs flapping all over the place in here. Check this one. Yeah, I think we're good. Again, let's just go through a few more turns since I did make a change. Make sure there's no interference between the pistons and the valves. I've already screwed up twice, so quadruple check. I got all sorts of bugs in here buzzing around my head. Alright, I think we're good. Alright, so the crux of my problem really was that some of the lifters still had oil in them, so they did not want to compress, and they need to compress in order for us to start at a known good position. Since they were all bled, we're able to go through and set 0 lash. After set 0 lash, quadruple checked it, go through and give it 3/4 of a turn. And what we're doing there is, let's say that the lifter cup travels this far. The goal really is to kind of put it roughly in the middle of that travel. All of the lifters. That's what the preload is, my understanding. And once you're sort of in that sweet spot, the difference in temperature, as the motor runs, and the buildup of oil pressure kind of makes up for any wear in the valve train by putting the cups in the lifter under compression by using oil pressure and temperature. So I believe that's how it works. If anybody knows any better, feel free to comment. Hey, I think we're good. So here's the general engine mock-up. Nothing terribly exciting. I didn't bother recording the painting of the block. I didn't do anything special. Just primed it with some rusty metal primer from Restomod, and painting with this stuff. I'm not sure what to do about the valve covers. I think I'm just going to try to polish these out, see what happens. Cheapo Chinese distributor. I think I paid 70 bucks for it off of Rock Auto. Reman AC Delco alternator, 2-wire. My understanding is this goes to ignition. This you can leave hang. I think I'll do that. I had to buy a new water pump. This is a long water pump in order to fit the brackets for the alternator. The old water pump is a short water pump, and you can tell that by this comparison here. So I think I'm ready to go. I still need to put oil in it. The manifold basically just laying here at the moment. Nothing's really tightened. Well, I shouldn't say nothing. The water pump, the alternator, and the manifold aren't tightened yet. I'm going to work on that next. Paint the water pump and put oil in it, like I said. Oh, oil filter. I need to put the oil filter on. I will definitely forget that and then try to prime it and make a mess. There's my oil filter. I'm trying to use as much AC Delco as possible. Not only the price is pretty good, but it's readily available. So, well, onward and upward.